Who wants to sit next to me? Oh, it's on. Good.
Okay. We need some pinchos here, right?
Oh, yeah, okay. That would be nice.
Okay, I'll throw you the first one, and it's probably one of the hardest one to answer. How do you recognize the next indie hit? You know, what makes you feel, okay, we're into something here, because I guess that each company is looking for different things.
I just listen to Yoshida-san and go after what he goes on.
So how do you approach that? What are your key features that make you think that you cannot let this game pass? We can begin in order here and then back or whatever, or just fight each other for the use of the word.
We never fight.
Yeah, because I would win. No competition. I think for me, you can't really separate the game idea from the team behind it. So for me, firstly, I'm looking that the personality of the developers is collaborative. It's great to work with people who are passionate about what they're doing. And then in terms of the concept itself, for me, what really excites me is interesting gameplay design. So if there's just someone's take on X genre or a new mashup or something, I think I really enjoy going on the imagination journey with the developers that I'm talking to. So I do spend quite a lot of time going on itch.io, Steam, just looking around. Twitter is really good, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword because social media is bad for you, but finding good developers is good for you. So lurking there is super great. And then coming to all these conferences and meeting people is a really good way to find the next hit. So, first I have breakfast, then I find my indie hit.
Yeah, it's probably a mix between, like you said, team is extremely important. Very often, I guess it's the same for everyone, it's happened that we don't sign a game due to the team. Or sometimes it's the opposite. It's a game that's not entirely within our portfolio, might be a bit budget risky, etc., but the team is so incredible that we might do the one step forward just because the team is incredible. So it's a mix between team, of course, how innovative, unique the gameplay game design is, how relevant to the market, because there are dynamic in trends, like roguelite deck builders sometimes might be not relevant right now when they were a few years ago, or survival games, etc. And relevancy with the budget. If you're presenting an incredible point and click but asking for 200 million euros, given the audience for point and click, that might be tricky.
Yeah.
For context, I'm German, so this will sound very German. I like to know that a team has done their research on their own. And obviously, when you do forecasting or market analysis, you can come to very different conclusions. We, as a publisher, might have a different idea, a different conclusion of our forecasting results and looking at the market than you do. But knowing that the developer is not only looking at the creative side, but also at least somewhat getting familiarized with the business side of things excites me, because I know they've done their homework. They have looked at the market. They've looked at what else is out there, and are trying to position themselves where they're maybe in a unique position in comparison to titles that have already been released or are in active development.
Yeah, no, it's really nice to see when folks have done a decent competitive set or a market analysis. But honestly, I don't give a fuck. It's in my mind, it's the publisher's job to be able to handle all that. And if the game is good and the team is like friendly and not fucking assholes, then that matters much more than any sort of research they can do. Like it's some of the things that we have signed and some of the devs that we have worked with are people that are, either straight out of student dormitory or like worked in, I don't know, fishmongering for 17 years and have been doing it on their own by the side, and they have no fucking idea about how to market what they're doing, but it's amazing. And, a great competitive set is not going to sell me on signing a game. A good build will always win for me. But yeah, a shit person with a good build will not get signed. Great competitive set with a shit build will not get signed. So in the end, make a good game to start with. If you have that down, then everything else is good. Like I love to see competitive sets because it get you an insight into how, not only do they know what the fuck they're doing, it's also telling you how they see the game in comparison to the competitors they have found out. But yeah.
It's funny, I've heard that say that from all the publishers or people with the money, right, funding games, that I don't care that much if the numbers are off. I care about you at least thinking that numbers will be involved in the situation at some point.
But sometimes it's the opposite. Very often, first we see devs not paying themselves, and then coming to the publishers and saying, okay, the total budget is 1 million or 500K, etc., not counting the work they've done. So it's very important to count it, especially during negotiation with publishers, because it's part of your rev share. So even if you didn't pay yourself, count it as budget, and very often it happens that publishers ask to raise the budget. So it's more efficient not to under-evaluate, underestimate, including your work and salary conditions, than being afraid of having a too high a budget. Under-evaluated budget is more risky than higher budget.
I think on that note, contingency, adding that into your budget is significant and important. Typically, and maybe you've seen different approaches, I've seen anything from like 5 to 20% maybe, seems to be oftentimes the comfort zone that developers go for. I think that's absolutely natural. Like, game development is not as straightforward always as you'd like it to be. That's just how creative work ends up being. So having a plan for what happens if you take a little bit longer in development is good, and just calculating that into the budget from the start rather than having to raise that later on, depending on the publishing agreement or the partner that you might be working with. That also might not be as easy because, for example, the budget has been dedicated already. So just have a little bit of wiggle room in your budget.
This is when you're renovating your house. Calculate a 15% extra because shit will happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I also usually just add 3 months to whatever project I'm signing. It's like, oh, but we don't need that. It's like, you will.
Yeah.
You will figure that out later. And if you're done in time, that's great. Then we have 3 months where you can polish and work on day one patch or whatever you want to do. But I don't think I've signed a game that has come out on time. Like, everything I've signed has been delayed in some way, shape, or form, and not like due to people being incompetent. It's just really hard. Like, we're working on the intersection between technology and art, and iterating and going back and forth between things and stuff 16 months in might be impossible to know month 1. So, as a publisher, you need to be flexible enough to deal with those kind of things as well, I think. So that's also something that bugs me occasionally when devs come, talk to me about stuff, and then it's like, yeah, the last time we signed with the publisher, we ended up, we needed a 2-month extension, and we couldn't get like any funding, so we had to fire 3 people, and then 1 person died of fucking hypothermia, and then, the apocalypse happened. And it's like, okay, why? That's a shit business decision from a publisher. Like, if you don't have the money, you don't have the money, but making sure that the game comes out as good as it can be under like somewhat, reasonable terms, by adding a little bit more time and a little bit more money so people don't fucking starve. That is always a better business decision in my mind than tanking something that you have been working on together for 20 months because you didn't want to add 10% more time. It's like if you treated cooking like you treat if you treated cooking like some publishers treat developers in the latter stages of development, it would be like making pasta, and then it's like, oh, it needs 2 more minutes. It's like, nope, let's throw this thing in the trash and eat out of the fucking trash can, and then complain about that it tastes bad.
I thought that's how we got al dente.
Yeah. I think that
Maybe
is
that's
how
the flaw.
Yeah, I think that's how Bocrones and Vinagre happened.
But yeah, building on what you were saying, Johan, I think that a good publisher needs to be elastic.
Yes.
And I think that when we are thinking about features of a pitch or formulating this ask, what I see these features as, like, budget, whether it's slightly overscoped or underscoped, or the competitor set. Usually I don't really see those items as deal breakers, but for me they're clues to see what the developer needs and how we can match those needs. And So they're not really like they're not so much yellow flags, it's those things that help you see the experience of the developers and what they're expecting from the deal, and even personality. I mean, we spend so much time thinking about money that you can start to kind of read tea leaves just from looking at someone's budget. Hooray for capitalism. It is great.
Oh, they use Comic Sans in their Excel sheets. That's interesting.
In that sense, indie publishers are different beasts than what publishers used to be, because back in, I don't know, 20 years ago, publisher gave you money and then put the game, or brought the game to stores. But you, for indie games, have to you have to complement their weaknesses. An indie company usually doesn't have a business specialist or doesn't have a PR specialist, so you have to do that for them, or you have to help them localize the game. So it's not babysitting, but it's complementing them in some ways and sometimes mentoring them. How do you approach that when you get a pitch or when a studio approaches you, you know you're not just being approached as money lenders, but also as future mentors, I guess. I mean, how does that feel for you?
Publishers, exactly, they're not just money bags. It's a lot of expertise like QA, release management, certification, playtest, trade, marketing, PR, community, etc., and the list goes on. So sometimes there are games that don't need money but just need these expertises, and they can have them without even a publisher. They can use like external outsourcing, PR agency, marketing agency, etc. But having a publisher taking care of the marketing and PR and having all these services internalized is generally on top of the funding part. It's generally the true goal of a publisher. We're there to support with all the services. Money is something on top, but the thing is an expertise. Developers have their own expertise in creativity, publishers have their own expertise, and that's the meeting of these two expertises that create great games.
Mm-hmm. I think the good thing about the market, especially these days, is we have these different opportunities for developers. They don't have to go with a publisher. They can go with a publisher for hire, like the Pop Agendas of the world, or go with a fund, like Hollow Knights. If you're not looking for both the funding and the services, there's always different opportunities out there for you. Publishers can only provide one thing, but we're probably the better fit, generalizing here, if you're looking for both parts. That's a good thing. Like, a publisher should be aware that they're a little bit of both ultimately, because if they're not, then there's other better opportunities out there for a developer at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And cheaper.
Yeah.
It's much cheaper to just go to a bank and cry it and get money than what it is to go with a publisher if you're not going to use the services. Mm. That's, yeah, I don't think there's anyone in this room that's as cheap as a bank could be.
I also think, I've started to wonder how much of a relationship there is in the value added by a publisher, depending on how experienced the developer is. So I feel like, it's just hard to make hit games because there's always a pressure, it's either amazing or it's kind of a flop and you're not going to be able to fund the next thing, and then you go with your cap in your hand, wearing so many hats, taking it out, and then asking for more money, and that is pretty tiring. But I guess I feel like it's harder if you haven't shipped a game before to even approach all the things that you don't know. So you end up in this interesting position where publishers definitely add a lot of value for people who haven't reached full maturity in terms of experience, but then you want to balance it in a way where the collaboration still has fruits and we can still kind of make money and work together. I find that people who are more experienced are typically more skeptical about working with publishers, because not always, but you have to pitch more because they kind of understand all the things that you would be offering, and then they have some benchmarks and some friends to talk to and things like that. But ultimately, I really like the idea of everyone being experts in different stuff and sharing. It's just, how do you make that into a good business, and how do you make sure that you are kind of this elastic partner that is one thing for someone but another thing for someone else? That's why it all comes down to the relationships. But yeah, that was 7 thoughts in one. But sometimes the fun thing about being in this space is always thinking about whether there's a better way to do it, and then sometimes having those like come to Jesus moments where it's like, actually, like publishing does work quite well for other people, so let's just try and be good at it.
I mean, one thing you can do to make it better for everyone is to publish your contracts online.
I'm going to get to there later. Don't worry.
No, but I think it's, I agree as well with everything you said, all of the 7 different thoughts.
The 7 deadly thoughts.
Yeah. No, but I mean, we are in, for example, we are in constant contract review internally. That is an ongoing conversation that I talk about the contract with multiple people in the company at least once a week, based on feedback from developers, based on feedback from Twitter occasionally when Twitter is not shit, and you know, figuring out what's in the contract, what are we offering, what are we not offering, what's the service that we are doing well, what's something we need to sharpen up. I mean, if you stagnate as a publisher, you're gonna be fine for a while, I guess. You can live on old things you've done to a certain extent, but everyone needs to be willing, able, and in continuous change, I think. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the thing is that it's not only a one-way relationship. I think every publisher grows from every game published.
Yep.
We gain from the knowledge and the expertise that the teams are bringing on top of their game. And Focus is a good example with Half Spaceship Breaker. It's like incredible game, and we learned so much thanks to the team. It's a crazy game that almost no one wanted to sign in the industry.
Almost.
I wanted to sign it.
Almost. That was the almost. But the important part is that we as publisher, we grow as well with every game.
You've mentioned the contract. That was something that I wanted to raise at some point. You made a bold move, publishing the publishing contract of Royal Fury. So I'm not going to ask you to divulge your contracts, but what would you say are the key aspects that one should be aware of when reading a contract from a publisher?
How to get in touch with a lawyer. Because you should have a lawyer. And if you can't afford a lawyer, ask the publisher to pay for a lawyer or pay for some of the part of it. We will give people we talk about contracts with, we will give them $500 immediately to help out a little bit at least with, you might not be able to get a full fucking service for $500, especially not in the West, but when you're talking to developers that might be in Latin America or in smaller underserved places, that might still be enough money for them to at least get a read-through by a lawyer. The benefit of having the contract online is that we have had a lawyer that did like a 10-part YouTube series, like an hour per fucking clause, which is good. I think you can learn a lot from that. But yeah, I mean, if a contract is hard to read, that is a little bit scary. But generally, just look at contracts as puzzles and figure out which parts kind of connect to which. It's like code or puzzles or whatever the fuck. There's a what-if clause, and then if the rest of the statement doesn't come directly after, it's hidden somewhere else in the whole document, then that's a bit weird, I think. So figure out which parts connect to which, and figure out how you're going to get fucked, and then argue against that.
I was going to say, I certainly wouldn't trust the person doing the deal with me to explain what the contract means, because that just feels very biased. Yep. And, you get to control the narrative. So I think being able to talk to other people about it, and other people who have worked with publishers, just reaching out to developers that they've worked with before. And if a publisher has a problem with that, that's a bit concerning. I guess the other thing is that this publishing discourse is so polarized. I feel like you have to be ready to hear one horror story or one bad review where something good didn't work out, and it's a bit of a minefield to choose, a publisher that has constantly delivered on a relationship level and constantly met those expectations, because the relationships are just so varied and so hard. So yeah, get other people to give you the lowdown, because sometimes, you know, you can save like 100K, or you can save months of trying to negotiate with a publisher because they have like first matching rights or whatever, but no obligation or time frame to actually reply. You know, it's like they have right of first refusal, but then they don't answer. So then maybe you put like a time box on it, like the 3 months thing. But don't have them explain it to you. Like I wouldn't negotiate like an employment contract either if they were like, oh yeah, that's fine. You know, sometimes you can just work extra hours. Don't worry about it. We do it all the time.
I think
Says me on a Saturday. Anyway, you carry
on our end, we don't have a standard contract, so that's why we could put contract online, but it would be like 200 contracts, so that wouldn't really make sense, because we're making like many different games with many different sizes, and the studios' requests or needs are very different. Sometimes they are looking for money, sometimes they are looking to protect the IP, sometimes they are looking for studio growth and sign multiple games, etc. So each contract is tailored to the relationship and what the studio needs. So 200 like contract dumped on Twitter or somewhere on Mastodon could be complex. The one thing is strongly emphasis on what Julie was saying. Always get to previous studios that sign with a publisher. You can ask that directly to the publisher, but of course the recommendation would be the best story. But you can just get in touch with any developers. One quick thing is that very often when you see a publisher that signs multiple games with a developer, that's always a good sign, meaning that something happened once with the studio and the developer, and the studio was sufficiently happy that they signed a second one. So that's generally a good sign. If you see a publisher that's never signed a second game for a studio, that can be a warning.
Then they're like crappy tourist traps in London. You know, you go, you eat there once, you're like, ah! And then you never go back. But they have enough tourists to just keep getting fed.
Yeah, you eat a cold sausage roll and drink a hot Coke.
Chris?
One thing in particular that I'd always look out for in publishing contracts, and definitely get a lawyer in on that as well, is recoup rates, or recoup as a whole. At which rate are publishers recouping? How much are they recouping? Are they recouping like multiple times what they invested? When are you going to see your first trend, like depending on how the game performs, are you going to get money from day one? Are you going to get money after the publishers made back their money twice? One tricky thing that some publishers like to do is recouping only from the developer share. That's not great, I should say.
That is essentially a multiplier, but it's sneaky.
Yeah, very sneaky. So looking at those recoup rates, compare them with other developers, but also specifically get a lawyer to look at what those clauses specifically mean, run the calculations, what that means, because you could end up having your game out for 3 years, it performing decently well, but still not seeing any money, and that's avoidable.
On the tricks part of the recoup, etc., there's a great talk by Callum Underwood on an event that Chris ran in Bavaria. It's called Money Talks. So if you type Money Talks Callum Underwood on YouTube, you're going to get the
Talk and Dev, just to
Talk and Dev. Yeah, it's really great. Great run through the different conditions, etc. So thanks to Chris.
One just addition to the talk to developers that work with the publisher that you're looking to go to. Don't, like, for sure, talk to the people that have had success with the publisher, but also talk to the games. If you look at, go to Steam, pull up the fucking Steam list and look at like which of these games have the least amount of reviews or the worst rating or whatever the fuck. Like something that didn't go well, and get in touch with those developers as well. Because if a publisher is treating folks that aren't successful as shit, then you don't want to end up in that place, because there's always a risk that something goes terribly, terribly wrong, regardless of how good the developer or the publisher is. And at that time, you still need to have enough humanity in both parties to treat each other respectfully, and keep working on getting that game into where it needs to go, even if it's 3 years.
Moving on to the next topic, when would you say is the sweet spot for pitching a game? At least for you.
4 beers in? No, 12 months out minimum, preferably like 16 to 30 months out, and with a prototype of some sort that I can put in my hands and play.
So the sooner the better, but with a prototype.
Yeah. It's really easy to say that you're going to make a Call of Duty with Mario physics with a nice little like monetization model in there, and then the actual shooting is going to feel fucking great. Like think Apex Legends, and you're like, all right, easy to say, tough to do, and then they go like, and we have a World of Warcraft DLC coming as well. It's like, I don't know about that. So a prototype, but it doesn't need to be like a massive prototype. It just needs to prove the core concept that you're doing. If you're making a platformer, the locomotion needs to be good. Like the locomotion always needs to be good, but in a platformer, it needs to be fucking great. The jump needs to feel good. The stickiness to the walls needs to be good. Like everything like that. If it's a shooter, it's the gunplay that needs to feel good. If it's a racing game, the fucking driving the car needs to be good. I don't care if you have 17,000 hand modeled trees in my racing track, if the car handles like shit. So getting the right thing into the prototype is important. You don't need to have a ton of stuff. It just needs to be the thing that you're doing 90% of the time. That's important. Sorry for the rant.
You'll agree?
Yeah. It depends on the studio track records, etc. So let's say tomorrow a studio comes with a CRPG pitch for 20 million, and it's Larian. I'm not going to ask a prototype to Larian for doing a CRPG. If it's a new studio with like incredible physics or something risky, yes, we're going to need something playable. It doesn't need to be a vertical slice. It can be very ugly. And having a beauty corner, dedicated small builds on the side would probably help. But yeah, the more risky, innovative, and the more first game from the studio it is, the more we're going to need a playable.
You rather want to be too early than too late. Typically, like especially as an event like here, even if you don't have a prototype ready or something playable, still a chance to connect with platform holders as they're here, or publishers, and just have a sit down and get sort of the foot in the door, have a little introduction chat. Maybe it's still at a concept stage at that point, but you can still have an early conversation, and then circle back a couple months from now when you have something playable, rather than waiting until everything's perfect and then potentially the publisher has already filled up their launch window and can no longer sign anything within those 2 quarters, or the budget allocation is just already completely dedicated to different projects. So I'd agree with what both of you have said, like the playable is perfect. If you have a chance to meet someone low-key at an event like this, perfect. Have a chat and then get yourself known, essentially.
I think that kind of depends though, because if it's your first game ever, then perhaps going through the experience of trying to prototype it and trying to see how you work as a team is good. Because maybe if there were some students that showed me a paper pitch, it would be good to, it would definitely be nice to have a conversation and give feedback and feel like it was meaningful. But then if I had to prioritize, I'd pick more experienced people or people with a build. Because the other thing is you're kind of fighting against the volume. So I know that's not the sweetest thing to say, but sometimes these things are just so, you're trying to fit in as many as you can, or you're trying to make sure that there's buffers in between so you can still have a human conversation rather than an automated one. So a lot of it is about the context and thinking about what you would like to get from the meeting. So going and saying your expectations, I would just really like some feedback, or I'm not sure about this. Or, do you think this is ready for going through your evaluation process or not? I think another thing as well is that you don't want to box yourself too much into the fact that you will get a publisher at month this, and this is the type of deal that will happen, and you need to have this level of development of prototype. I think there are so many publishers that are now either doing acquisitions or investment or anything like that. It doesn't mean you always have to get ready to talk about being acquired, but the money is flowing in different ways than it used to. So maybe someone will fund your prototype, maybe someone will invest in your studio, maybe there will be co-development. I guess now I've learned it loads this year, because at Thunderful I'm scouting for publishing and investment and M&A and this prototype fund that Robot Teddy have. and I would try to make it like email folders, and I'd be like, we will have publishing discussion, we will have investment discussion, and then you go and you realize there could be all these other ways to work together. So I think thinking about different ways that you're open to collaborating, and then if your studio or your project is a work in progress, but you have kind of something else to prove for it, then you should just start talking to people and see what else is possible. Sometimes I talk to people and they're like, oh, I didn't know you do investment. I just did the publisher thing because, that's what people want to see. They want to see the publishing thing. So I think sometimes thinking outside of the boundaries is good, especially once you have a game or two under your belt. Like, people like us are very obsessed with finding the next big thing, and so if there is an idea that they can get in early, or they can start to like craft a special kind of relationship with you, then that's going to feed the thing that makes us tick as well. So maybe it's relevant now, maybe it's relevant in a few years, but just thinking a little bit outside of the traditional box can open up opportunities that, unless you ask, unless you try, you just wouldn't get.
I'm curious, have you ever, you say that you need some time to consider the deal, make it happen, blah, blah. Have you ever seen something so good that you said, I don't care if I've got all my budget dedicated to another project for the next 4 months, I want to publish this. So let's, blow the whole line up because I'm totally publishing this.
I mean, you can find a tweet where I go, this looks good, can I have it, essentially, to Dome Keeper. And also, if I can't have it, you should talk to other scouts, by the way. That was essentially it. I was going on dad leave. That was a Sunday, I was out with my kids walking, and I saw that GIF or video, I can't remember, on Twitter. I was like, holy shit, this looks fucking amazing. If someone is not like signing this now, someone's going to sign this tomorrow, so we should get going. And I immediately just like wrote to René, and then I wrote to my team and to our finance and CEO folks to make sure that the ball was rolling when I came in on Monday. And I think it took 2 weeks, something like that. And most of that time was just like making sure that the lawyer had time to go over the contract, so we're not fucking anyone over. And that I'm not lying about what the contract means. And then when that's done, it's just like, yep, cool. Obviously, not something that would break the bank in terms of budget size. It's a 2-man team with outsourcing, essentially. A 2-people team, I should say. Other than that, I don't know. There's been a few large projects.
Has this happened to any of the rest of you?
Yeah. I've had a meeting at GDC a couple of years ago where I was blown away by the pitch, pulled in, got my colleague who's also at GDC to do a second meeting with them, and then at the end of the week we went out with our CEO at the time, different company, for dinner, and we're like, yeah, we definitely need to sign. It's phenomenal team. First project under that company umbrella. They had done stuff before. Ultimately, we lost out against a way more experienced publisher. It's fair. And they were able to offer better deal terms and had a bigger team. That's still a bit sad about that.
A sore spot.
Good for them. They ended up being very successful. But yeah.
So it can happen.
Yeah, for me, I have one good and one bad side of the thing. There was one game I absolutely wanted to sign. I've been following them, exchanging, meeting them for years, doing workshops, etc. But it was at a previous employer, not the current one. And I'm wearing the T-shirt of the game, so only the people who play it can recognize. But yeah, I worked a lot to make that happen. Whatever the cost, this game is absolutely incredible. In the end, it didn't happen. On the other side, there's a Dordogne game. I was at the previous employer, and I wanted to sign this game. So when I left the employer, I told them, okay, it's in process. You have 2 months. Let me know if you don't sign it, because it's going to be the first game I sign in joining Focus. And that's exactly what happened. I signed it as soon as they said no.
That's great.
I think the thing that kind of makes most of the scouts is the games that they didn't sign, not the games that they did sign. The measure of your taste for successful games, because if you're salty, you're like, look how much it sold. If only anyone listened to me, huh? And then if it does so, you're like, yes, this was modestly good and everything happened according to plan, So it's the ones that got away where you're like, I'm a genius. I always thought I was, but this.
But it's worse when things get away because you didn't see the good stuff, and then you go like, I don't understand what's going to happen with this one, and then 2 weeks later, like 2 million fucking units sold. What?
Yeah.
And then you just spend like months just playing and looking at that same stuff, and it's like, why don't I understand why this is good? I'm shit. No one should hire me, please.
I have some names.
I have like 5 or 6 games that I looked at and I couldn't understand them, and they were like millions of units within the first year.
We're getting old, Johan.
Yeah, I think I just have a really good taste in games, and game players don't have that.
Yeah, my hypothetical publisher has the best portfolio you've ever seen.
We don't have time for more, guys. Thank you very much. We don't have time for questions, but these guys have been here for the previous day. They will be around for a while yet, so you can have one-to-one meetings with them or just grab them, tackle them when they're running up and down the corridor.
Please don't tackle me. I'm 115 kilos. You will bounce back.
If you want to hurt yourself, you can tackle Yaouanq. If you want to stop one of the rest, you'll be fine. Thanks a lot again. Yaouanq, Yves, Julia, Chris, it's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.